Today we're going to analyze the Cuban Missile Crisis from a game theory point of view. This crisis occurred in 1962 in the middle of the Cold War, which involved the major two superpowers in those years, which were the USSR and the United States of America. This incident consisted in the possibility of one of the two major powers to start a nuclear war by launching their missiles in their respective strategic areas. In this first matrix, we're going to analyze the Nash equilibrium, the dominant and the dominated strategy. But first, we need to explain that in this first scenario, the USSR has a military capacity advantage over the USA. Let's say that the USSR does have the capacity to launch missiles, nuclear missiles, to the US region, since it has been positioned in Cuba, while the USA does not have yet the ability to launch missiles and reach the USSR region. So in this case, the USA does have a disadvantage, which is shown in the results of the payoff matrix. So if both launch missiles, it would lead to a -1 and 2. In this case, the dominant strategy for the United States would be to launch missiles. Because if they decide to not launch missiles, it would lead to -2, while launching missiles, although having a disadvantage to the USSR, it would be -1, but still better than -2. The dominant strategy for the USSR would be also to launch missiles, because the benefit obtained with this strategy compared to the strategy of not launching would be greater. Therefore, the dominant strategy would be to launch missiles, and the dominated strategy would be not to launch those missiles. In the same way, the Nash equilibrium is at the point where both dominant strategies match, which is the point -1 and 2, or in other words, launch missiles. The Nash equilibrium is the point where both players go to do their best. Players only care about their individual decisions and not group decisions. So we do not take into account the possibility that both players reach to an agreement in the case that they think that would be a better result to not deploy those missiles. In this next matrix, we're going to change the scenario. Now, both superpowers have the same military capacity. Let's say that the USSR has missiles positioned in Cuba, able to reach the US region, and the US has those missiles positioned in Turkey, able to reach the USSR region. Both capacities matching. And this shows as the Nash equilibrium occurs at the point -10, -10, since the dominant strategy is to launch missiles. But the personal dilemma occurs at the point 0, 0, because although it's not the dominant strategy, it is the point where the greatest collective benefit is obtained. It is the best benefit in terms of social welfare. In this matrix, we're going to analyze the payoff dominance and the risk dominance. First, we're going to explain the perspective of the game for both players. Their objective in this game on whether to launch missile or don't is to become the major superpower and have the military advantage over the other. So in the case that the USA, for example, launches a missile and the USSR doesn't, the USA would have an advantage over the USSR for the damages caused. So the less risky option in this case for both players would be not to launch missiles. And that would result in no damages caused. But in that case, there would be no benefit for both players, as none of them would have an advantage over the other. And the point in this game is to become the major superpower. So now we're going to analyze the max-min, the minimax, and the max-max. In this matrix, the max-min would be -8, -8. So if both launch missiles. This consists on choosing the best outcome over the worst possible situation. So if the USSR decides to launch a missile, which is the worst situation for the USA, the best possible outcome would be to launch a missile, which is -8, respective to not launch a missile, which would be -9. And this would be vice versa for the USSR compared to the USA in another situation. Now, in order to determine the minimax, we're looking for searching the worst of the best situation of the other player. So let's say that the USSR is looking for the worst situation possible in case the USA launches a missile. In that case, there are two outcomes. Either launching again a missile, which would be -8, or not launching a missile, which would be 4 for the USA. Between those two, the worst possible situation for the USA would be -8. The max-max would be if both players, the USA and the USSR, is looking for their best possible outcome. In that case, it would be if one decides to launch a missile while the other one doesn't, which would lead into a -1-4 in the case of the USA and 4-9 in the case of the USSR. So they are both looking to launch a missile in order to reach that best outcome. So if both decide to launch missiles, the max-max would be -8, -8.